Oh, hi there. I'm Kat. Thank you for joining me for Chat with Kat. We're going on a journey and having conversations with people from a variety of backgrounds and experiences. And during this journey, we're going to probably laugh and smile. We'll have moments of compassion and cry. We may be angry or feel confronted, and we may be amazed and just need to ponder. So, whatever the emotion is that comes up, let's take a moment to breathe and ask ourselves why we're feeling this. And also, let's ask, what can I learn from this? So go ahead and like, share, subscribe to this, and make sure that your friends and family and colleagues and anyone you feel could get something from this gets to see this. So let's get on with our journey with Chat with Kat.
Well, hey, Joe, nice to see you. Thank you so much for coming and joining me today. I know we're kind of in different areas, but and we do know each other from Self Perfected, so thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. I know you live in Mexico, and I would much rather be there than here right now because it's like -2, 1 degree. But yeah, we'll stay in warm.
That's in Fahrenheit, right?
Yeah, Fahrenheit, yes.
You're talking -1 or 2 Fahrenheit?
Yes.
Oh my God, that's cold. No, thank you.
Yeah. It's took some time to get used to it. So I've adapted pretty well with as long as I've lived here, but it doesn't get better, it seems like.
And that's one thing I hate is the being cold. And like from being Vancouver, Canada, it's like damp and cold all winter. Like for 10 months of the year when it rains, it's damp and cold and it just gets in your bones. So no thanks. I'm happy to see the snow and go ski for a few days and like play in the snow for a few days and then leave.
Yeah, it's not an option here. I gotta shovel myself out, type of situations. But it's all right. It's a nice area.
Yeah, yeah. Well, anyways, I know about you a bit about you, anyways, and I mean, we were at the same event in San Diego a couple of years back, but I don't know if I actually met you in person. I just kind of saw you there. But maybe tell people who don't know anything about you or know very little about you a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Yeah. So my name is Joe Jackman. I always tell people my name is Joe, but if you ever can't remember me, just think I'm not your average Joe. It's always been a fun thing for me just to kind of because people are like, oh, you just an average cup of Joe, or they always throw those one-liners at you. So I learned to differentiate myself through doing that, which has been pretty fun. You get a laugh out of people. Which one thing about me is I love having fun. I love being able to laugh when I can and really enjoy other people laughing and playing and just having a good time with that. So for me, like, a little bit about me is I'm originally from California. I didn't necessarily come from a great background, so laughter really wasn't an average thing for me. So now, as I've grown into the young man that I've continued to become, laughter and enjoyment has been such a big thing within my life. I love to laugh. I love to dance. I love to smile. I love all of that. Besides that, I am a husband. I've been with my wife for going on. We just passed our 10-year mark on December 10th that we've been together.
Wow.
We've known each other since about middle school. But we started dating 10 years ago. So we've been in our lives quite a bit. I have a 7-year-old son who is my world. He is a wonderful, playful, awesome dude that loves to just have as much fun as he can. So those are some fun things about me. I also am, part with an educator. I do help other people with education. And then also I know a lot about cars and different things like that. I did construction for 10 years, just kind of a little rundown about things that who I am and what has helped shape me. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Congratulations on 10 years, by the way. I mean, in today's world, that is like a lifetime and it's an amazing feat. So congrats on that.
I appreciate that. Yeah, me and my wife were talking about that the other day. We're like, gosh, can't believe we've been in each other's lives for 10 years together officially. Like, it was crazy. We were talking about some of the things, we've only been part of Self-Perfected for about like 3 years. So there was about 7 years of I'd call them hardships. I wasn't the greatest person, but my wife seen a lot more in me and continued to stick by my side. And she helped create the man that I am today, which is awesome because I always say this, as a man, it's one thing you can build yourself from the ground up and do all this stuff. But without a good woman who supports you in multiple ways and sees a vision for you, you can only go so far. And that was my wife, and she had a vision for me before I even knew what my vision was. So I'm very grateful she's stuck it through for these 10 years, and I'm excited for the next 10.
Oh my gosh, I love hearing that. I don't know. I mean, I know in our group it's a little bit different because it's a very much relationship focused and community focused and supporting each other and really helping us be our best selves. But I love hearing that your wife had a vision for you before you knew what it was and really supported you in it. So, I don't know a lot of people outside of our community who can really say that. So.
Yeah, and that's one thing I'm very grateful with because even before me and my wife got involved with the community, it was very huge on. We were fighting all the time. We had a lot of these problems, a lot of situations that just weren't ideal for us. And I was a heavy drug user. I smoked pot for a long time. I did heroin. I was very active within doing these drugs. And even through all that, she told me after about, I think it was a year of us being in the group, she actually was really honest with me and said, Joe, if it wasn't for this group, I didn't know if we were going to be together. I seen this vision, but it felt like you kept going further and further away from me within this, and I didn't know what to do. And once we became part of Self-Perfected, it really laid down a structure for us to actually have self-realization not only like between each other, but also with us as individuals. Because I didn't have the greatest upbringing, so for me, a huge thing that we're talking about was like our definition of love. For me was like, no matter what I do, my definition of love was like, you will always be by my side, no matter what I do, no matter what it is that I stray from, no matter what the situation may be. My definition of love was that you love me unconditionally. When her definition of love was like doing acts of favors, dishes, things like that, stuff that like, I'm Mexican, and my mom did a lot of that stuff for me. She wasn't like, "Hey, mijo, come and do the dishes." It was she would do the dishes for me, or she'd cook for me. So I had this ideology of like, this is what it should be, without taking self-responsibility of understanding that, oh, well, I can also do that stuff and help out and be a productive member within this relationship to help create something better. And so we had some turmoils at the beginning, and we went through it back and forth, and we were able to get through it, and I'm very grateful for it.
Wow! Oh my goodness, that's pretty incredible to hear that. That's kind of where your life was before. So, what got you into the community? Like, what got you with Self-Perfected?
So crazy, right? So I've actually known Jessica for years. When I first moved to Minnesota when I was younger, I moved when I was about like seven years old. I moved here. But then I kept going back and forth every summer. I'd go out there, live with my grandma for the summer. I'd come back for school here, and then I'd go back out there. I did that for a long time. But right around, I want to say it was like 10 years old, I decided to stay here for a summer. And there was, I was very religious. I was very big into Christianity. I read about, I was diving very deep. My mom was very like, you're going to church Sunday, whether you like it or not. She didn't care if I had friends over. The friends were coming to church, whether they liked it or not. It was undisputable, right? So the church I went actually offered what was called this, it was like a church camp, is really the best way to put it, right? And at the time, I was like, Mom, I'm not going. Like, it's not gonna happen. Like, I'm not going, because you would go there and you'd be there for like a week, 2 weeks sometimes, and you would just be living out on this lake with all these other young men and women in cabins, learning about the Bible, doing games, all this stuff. But that really wasn't me. I matured by the age of 7. I was gang related at that point, and by 10, I was doing a lot more physical things in the gang every time I go out to California. But the situation lied was like, so at the church, there was this older couple that were like, hey, at the time, my family didn't have the money to go to for me to go to this camp, but my mom really wanted me to go. This older couple, they were part of the youth group. They were actually worked very well with me with everything. They actually paid for me to go. And at that point, I was like, all right, they paid for me to go. I have to go. I can't just not go. So I went, and that is actually where I met Jessica. I met Jessica at this church camp, and we then became friends, and we became friends for years to come. So me and my wife, this is now, like 10 years later, me and my wife got together at like 17 years old. And we started talking, and by, I'll say 2020, we decided we wanted a child. So we then had a child, and that's what Milo came about. Well, we both knew that we didn't want to send him to public school because public school wasn't effective for me. It wasn't effective for her. I have a lot of friends who it wasn't effective for. And it was way more damaging going to public school than it was for actually us being educated. They didn't care about us. And so that was a huge point. So we started looking for other opportunities for educating our child. Well, then I started seeing this thing on Facebook. Jessica kept reposting these things about TechnoTutor. I want to complain about this. TechnoTutor, I want to complain about this. And I'm like, what's all this? What? It doesn't. And then I'd read these long letters that they were complaining about, and it was really just them like complaining that my child is so smart that I'm not keeping up with them. And at that point, I'm like, well, I want my child to be smart, Like I always had this ideal that I wanted my son or child to be like an astronaut or a scientist, because that was stuff that I always wanted to be, but wasn't. I was never told that I could be it. I was always told that that's out of your reach. You that ain't never gonna happen for you, no matter how much you try, right? So I was like, well, if I can't do it, I bet you my son, I can help him into do something great like that. So then I reached out to Jessica, and I was like, hey, what's up with this whole TechnoTutor thing, self-perfected group? What do you guys like? What's up with this? And she's like, well, let me put you in contact with my husband. And this is how I met Mitch. Now, me and Mitch first talked on the phone, probably for, I think it was like an hour or 2 hours, just talking on the phone, right? And he's like, well, hey, we're coming down because Jessica's family lives in this area. He's like, well, hey, we're coming down to this area to go ahead and, meet up with Jessica's family. What if I come out, we can meet somewhere, and I can, kind of talk with you some more. It was like, cool. Sounds like a plan. Let's do it. So he drove 3 hours down this way because we live 3 hours away from each other. And we sat at a coffee shop, a local coffee shop, and we talked. Now, this, I will say, is a little bit of a personal thing, and I'm perfectly okay with it being out there, but I'm just letting you know up front, and any viewers that are listening, how I met Mitch. So before me and my wife officially got married, I was diagnosed with HSV, which is herpes. And at the time, I was not a good child before I met my wife. I thought I was this little player, and I was not a good person within that point. I abused a lot of women in multiple ways that now I look back and I am ashamed of in multiple ways. But I've got in contact with multiple of these women, and I've laid out stuff, and we've gotten on the same page of things. Obviously, it doesn't make it right, but I do understand that I was a child when I made these decisions. But anyway, so I got diagnosed with HSV. And that was something I had to accept because, at the time, my wife was like, have you been like cheated on me? Like what's going on, And like I told her, I was like, no, I was completely faithful throughout all times. And that's something for me that's very huge because before my wife, I was not faithful. But with Kayla, there was something about her that I knew no matter what, I wanted it to work out. I didn't know how I didn't know what the situation was, but I just wanted it to work out. So days before I met Mitch, okay, the only way I was able to get rid of it was that I had to get a circumcision at the age of 24, which is crazy. 24 years old, you're getting told that, hey, they got to give you a circumcision. I was like befuddled. Like, this is wild. Like, what do you mean? Like, no, that's not happening. But it was the only way because I was having UTIs very aggressively and to the point where like I was crying just to go pee. It was very very harmful to me in multiple ways. And both not only mine and Kayla's relationship, but my relationship with my own body and myself. So days before I met Mitch, okay, I set up an appointment. I had to get it done. So they took me in, I got a circumcision done, and then 3 days later, I met Mitch in a coffee shop, hunched over with a cane. As he's like standing up, not expecting, the first time met me, not knowing what to expect from me, let alone me be hunched over with a handmade cane that I made myself, introducing myself to him. And now we look back at this and we laugh about the situation because and that's why I tell the story because I think it's funny. But I also tell the story because like when I got told that, it was literally like I looked up all online, like, okay, what are other options? What are other things? And it's like everybody was so ashamed about being diagnosed with that nobody shared other remedies or other situations of like what they went through, what to expect, what was the situation that when that occurred, what happened with that, you know? So I'm very always open about it because I hope that if there's ever a gentleman out there that has that same situation, which I have now found that there's multiple people out there that do it, but they don't talk about it because it's this whole man structure that, you know, you shouldn't talk about that thing. But it's like, I would have been way more supported if I would have had information on how to handle something like that. But there was nothing out there like that. I mean, I looked everywhere and I couldn't find nothing. But anyway, so I meet with Mitch, right? And I'm on these pain pills because it's just I was in tremendous pain. But I was like, I am not gonna pass up this meeting with this guy because like I was like, I seen him on Facebook. He has like these 10,000 followers and he's willing to talk with me. And I was just like almost astonished by him, right? I'm like, I have to meet him. Like I don't care what condition I'm in. I have to meet this guy. So I show up and we sit down and you know, Mitch. He actually was dressed up in a nice button-up shirt, some nice jeans, you know, very well, had his stuff organized. We shake hands, we sit down. And honestly, we sat at this coffee shop for about 3 hours just talking. We didn't talk about Technotutor. We didn't talk about Self-Perfected, nothing. We just talked and got to know each other, had coffee, had a good time about it. And then at the end, he's like, Joe, you know, because I was like, all right. I was like, we've had this time, like, talk to me. What's this Technotutor? What's this Self-Perfected? What is all this? He goes, Joe, I could show you all these things, right? He goes, but let me tell you this. We're having an event in San Diego. And he's like, you would get the most out of it if you just went to this event. Now at the time, I'm like, this guy is telling me this. Like, he probably just, you know, I don't know. He probably just wants me to buy something. I don't know. I was like, I don't know. And Mitch was like, Joe, I promise you it'll change your life. So I was like, well, let me talk to my wife. Let me see what it is. You know, I got the numbers of how much it cost and everything like that. I go back, I talk with my wife, and Kayla's like, Joe, one of us has to go. Whether that's me, whether that's you, one of us has to go. And I don't know how we're going to do it, but we have to make it happen. And I was like, okay, so who do you think should go? And she said, well, I think now my wife, when we first became into the group, she was more of an introvert and I was an outrovert. I was the talkative, as you could see, the outgoing, the, hey, let's go do this, do that. Well, she was kind of more of the, unless you ask me a question, I'm not going to speak. So she's like, Joe, you need to go. She's like, you need to go to this event. You go out there, get the information for our family, figure out what this is all about, do your research, and try to talk to as many people as you can. So I buy my ticket. I buy my plane ticket. I ended up renting one of the rooms with a gentleman that I've never met in my life. He's still a part of the group, but he doesn't come around as much. But I went half and half with him on a room. Okay, so I get there and I just freeze. And that's probably why, like, I probably met you, but you probably didn't really get to meet me now, because I went there and I just froze. My mom always told me, Joe, you go in a room with 100 people, you'll give yourself an hour, you'll make friends with them. And I always lived by that. I was put in a room with 150 people and I was given 3 days. And I, within those 3 days, cowered and walked away from almost everybody, which is crazy to me. I would literally, the first night, the blackout event, I would talk to somebody, I'd step away, I'd call my wife. Hey, I'm panicking here. I'm having a panic attack. I don't know what to talk about. I don't know what to say to these people. I have no idea, right? The week goes on, and I actually had some really breakthrough moments within that week, within those 3 days of me being there. Amazing breakthrough moments that actually, that event is when I stopped smoking pot. And I went back and I told my wife, I'm like, hey, I'm not smoking weed no more. And my wife was like, I don't believe it. I won't believe it till I see it. And it was huge because, like, I literally have a tattoo of the THC chemical formula tattooed on me, because that was something to me that I like. My parents smoked weed, my sisters smoked weed, my aunts and uncles smoked weed, my cousins smoked weed, my grandpa smoked weed till he died. You know, that was like our family thing. So for me to come back and say that was flabbergasting to my wife, because I literally used to tell her, don't ever make me choose between you and pot because you won't like the answer. And I was very destructive within that. But I came back and I was like, no, I was like, I'm done. I was like, I'm done smoking. Like, this is it. And I stopped and I've been sober ever since. And then that's when I was like, I came back and I told Kayla, I was like, we got to be a part of this group. We have to get these tools that they talk about. We have to do this. Like, I don't know how I'm going to figure it out yet, but we're going to sit down with Mitch and we're going to figure it out. And so I want to say, the event was in July. I think it was in June. And then I got TT in July, and then I got my LD in August. And so it was literally all in one. I was in it. I'm like, I'm all for it. And so that was really when I started becoming part of Self Perfected and joining on the calls and listening every Friday night, and really just seeing the value that they had to offer as a community, more than just, going out with people, getting drunk and high like I used to do. So that was, I know, kind of long story, but kind of circled back on how I really got involved, was within all of that happening. And I know we always talk about in situations where it's like, it'll test you multiple ways until you finally break and you get there. Those were my tests getting to that point where then I finally broke and was like, all right, I'm in, I'm all in, I'm playing. And yeah, so it was a crazy experience.
Oh my gosh. That is, it's an amazing, incredible journey that you've gone on. And I think there's a lot of people out there who can probably relate to being in that situation, like where you were at in your life, and thinking like, hey, there's no way out of this. And like, why should I even bother? Right. Because this is what I know. But what strikes me is that the impact it had on you, it's like in 3 days, that something in the community and the conversations that you had just hit that switch and you went, no more, this has got to change. And for me, that is probably one of the most incredible things to see that and hear, is that somebody who came from the situation and lifestyle that you were living could just do that in 3 days.
Yeah, and a crazy point with it was a lot of it happened on the last day. Because like the lifestyle that I understood was completely just like Like the first time I remember Mitch inviting us out to his house to stay the weekend out there. I was immediately like in like, what does this white guy want from me to stay at his house with my family? And like, I was just all paranoid. So like, we went out there, and I literally had like a knife under my pillow because that's how I was raised. I was like, this guy is opening up his house to me. Like, what's going on? Like, what's happening? And it's like the same thing within that last day of that event. There was a couple people that I was out on, and I actually have this video recording of myself from that day because that's how impactful it was for me. I was there on the balcony as they were dancing, and I was just looking out at the ocean. I love the ocean. The ocean's just the most peaceful thing for me. I love the sound of the waves. I love the smell. I love the mist when you're just close enough and the wind's blowing. It's very, very cinematic for me for being by the ocean. And there we are, right? And I'm just looking out, and a couple guys come out, and they're like, "Hey, what are you doing out here? Like the party's in there." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm just taking it all in." And they sat out there with me. And they're like, "Well, let's take it in with you." And they started to talk to me. And they pulled out this memory from when I was 10 years old. There was a situation that happened in California where a young man got killed on my accord. He was no older than I was at the time. But the bullets that went for him were supposed to go to me. And so it was something that I didn't talk with many people about. Like, only a few people knew about this situation, even within my family. Only a few people knew about the situation. And it was very, very traumatic. But the way I was built, in the sense of being related in the gangs that we were within my family, was, it's just another life. It's the way of how we were raised. It's not of importance in that way. You have to move forward from it. But this always sat with me. And like I said, like my mother knew, and I want to say like two other people within my family actually knew about this story. But there I am in San Diego, looking out at the lake and just thinking to myself, like, wow, change can actually happen if I really, really want it. And these guys come out, and this is before I had TechnoTutor. This is before I knew what DIP was. This was before I was even really involved with the community. It was Austin Hale, John Solario, and then there was two other guys that I don't remember their names. They were just kind of there for support. But Austin Hale and John Solario were the two main people that really just pulled this out of me. And I started bawling. And that was huge for me because for me, like the way I was taught was like, men don't cry. That's just, my dad always told me when you cry either in the shower or you cry in your car before you go inside from when you get back from work. Those are the only two times my dad ever told me it was acceptable to cry as a man. So there I am, 20, that was like 24, right? At the end of 24 years old. Crying, just bawling. I couldn't hold myself. I was just literally letting it go. And as I'm doing this, Austin and John were guiding me through self-forgiveness, or having me forgive that point from that memory that I had from when I was 10. And that was really the moment that changed it all for me. That I seen that this group was more than just the tools. It was more than just the events. It was more than just someone telling you something at a seminar. There was real value from these people, and they wanted to help you, and they wanted to support you and help you be a better person. And so that was really the triggering point, was that these grown men got me to cry. And I have been in numerous situations where I've been shot at. I've almost been stabbed. I have been in situations where I've been in gunfights. I have been in situations where I was beat within an inch of my life. And even then, in those situations, I didn't shed a tear because that's not what I was taught. But yet these two grown men were able to pull this memory out of me and get me to be expressive about it. And then crying and then walking me through the points of like why I'm crying. Because even as I'm crying and bawling, I didn't have like an understanding of why I was crying or bawling. Like I was still kind of just like, dude, I was taught to not really think about this stuff. Like, but yet here I am bawling. And I remember after I did that, right? I was like, hey, you know, give me a few minutes to kind of compose myself, right? They went in and I was like, I'll be back in there. They went inside and I took my phone out and I recorded myself crying and I talked to myself and I told myself, Joe, I'm recording this because I want you to always remember this moment because this is the moment where you change. This is the moment where life changes for you and you will change for life. So I want you to always remember this exact moment. And I have it saved on my phone and I've never deleted it. There's sometimes I look back at it, but that was where for me it was like there was no going back. And I still to this day will never go back.
Wow. What? Sorry, I'm just taking a moment with that because that's such an impactful moment that you've just shared in such a very private moment. And I thank you for that. So I'm just taking a moment here to take that in. But, wow. I think what's really blowing my mind is that I think a lot of men have been brought up that way where it's not acceptable to have those emotions. And then given the situations that you were in, to actually be able to feel safe enough to do that in the presence of these people that you just met. Because, you know, with all the things that you talked about and what you've experienced and never shed a tear during those times, it truly had to be a moment of absolute safety for you to do that. I mean, there's not really a question from that. It's just really an observation that I'm taking in right now.
No,
I know.
100. Yeah, no, 100%. You know, and even the sense of a safety, right? I'd say it was even further in the sense of um, trust was built from that moment. Safety is one thing, but I was never taught to be safe. I was always taught that trust is the only thing that's real in life, is what I was always engraved with my head. And you can feel that from the moment you walk in the room with people on whether or not there's trust that can be built, just how their demeanor, how they respond to you. As a man and then being Mexican, I was always taught that, you know, when you walk into a room, most people should stand, shake your hand, and introduce themselves. And if they don't do that, you make sure you go around and introduce yourself to everyone in that room. And you shake their hand and you formalize yourself with them. And so for me, it was like with, you know, with those four guys that were out there, Austin, John, and the other two, it wasn't so much that I felt safe. It was more of the fact that I felt as if though they were trustworthy. Their energy, the way that they were talking to me, the way that they carried themselves with me, even after the next day, the morning I would say the following morning, when everyone was like leaving and everything, me and Austin then sat and had another like 2-hour talk of just not even just like about smoking pot, but just like where we were at and like, you know, how this group has helped him. And it really pushed me within understanding that this community was more than just about feeling safe or feeling more than just feelings. Because like safe, people can like describe that with a feeling like, oh, I felt safe, so I felt good, I felt happy. But it's like when you go into trust, that's not a feeling that you can really describe. You could say like, yeah, I felt good, but it's not really describing being trustworthy. And so like, I have this saying I have a whiteboard downstairs and I have this saying on it. And it goes, ready is not a feeling. Ready is the decision you make. And that has been something that has sat with me for so long, and understanding a lot more on like having conversations with people. There's a certain feeling that you can get, but if you're not ready to open up or ready for that support, that feeling does not matter in any way. But the readiness comes from you deciding that this is it. This is what I'm ready for. And at that time, I decided that I was ready. And they were able to pull it out of me through showing me that they were trustworthy people. And being able to have that is what really pushed me even further. Once I got TechnoTutor, it was like I ran with it. Within the first year, I lost over 80 pounds, which people think is crazy because I used to be like 230, 220 pounds. I'm at like 150, 140. I kind of go back and forth. I don't ever go no lower than 140 and never no really higher than 150. But it's because when I dove into my process, I found that there was a lot of traumatic things within me that I needed to work through. There were things that were, and trauma is just like fat. It hangs on to you. Like, okay, so when you make homemade tortillas, right, there's 4 ingredients that involve within homemade flour tortillas, right? Flour, salt, some sort of fat, lard, coconut oil, whatever you decide to use, right? And baking soda. Okay. Those are the only 4 ingredients that you need to make a tortilla. But if you had flour, salt, and baking soda or powder, would those ingredients be able to stick together for you to form something?
No,
not
really.
Exactly. You need the fat, you need the lard, you need the coconut oil, whatever you decide to use, because that is what holds everything together. Well, the thing is, with our body, fat grabs onto stuff. It's like lard, it's like coconut oil. It grabs onto these traumatic things and it physically hangs on to you. And that's why they say, like, when you like, oh, I got to get the monkey off my back. It's because you feel a weight on you. Well, the reason being is because that fat that your body has is grabbing onto whatever thing you're holding onto, and you're trying to get the monkey off your back, but you can't because it's physically on you. So you have to find, a way in order to let this stuff go. And so for years of my life, up until I was 24 years old, I never let things go. I held grudges for lifetimes. I didn't trust people. If they fucked me over once, sorry for the language, but if even one time, I remembered it and I held on to it. And that was something that physically, and if like you even like if you go back, like if you go on my Facebook, right? I just posted a bunch of pictures of me and my wife for our 10-year anniversary, right? You go onto my Facebook, some of those pictures are from before we were in the group. And you can see the physical weight on my face, on my body, on who I am. It's crazy because a lot of people look at these pictures and then they look at me now and they're like, there's no way. Because I didn't change my eating habits. I didn't work out. I didn't do anything different. I still, honestly, I'm one of those people, I can eat 2-3 burgers, no problem. Double bacon burgers, easy, no problem. I can eat a 24-ounce steak and still be hungry after it. People think I have a tapeworm, but I don't. I've gone to the doctors. I'm perfectly healthy. It's like people think like, Joe, you had to have done something different. I was like, no, I learned how to let things go. I learned how to walk my process and physically let things go, to where I was no longer hanging on to this stuff that was going to affect me, that was going to affect my wife, that was going to affect my son, that was going to affect the people around me. I learned how to let it go. But yeah, it's like, in that moment was really where it all started, because Austin and John showed me how to let it go. They helped me let go of a very traumatic point in my life that I have always blamed myself for, because I made the decision for that kid to be where I was. And he wasn't educated enough that once he started hearing gunshots to run. But I was, so I ran because I didn't want to get shot. But he didn't know that, because that wasn't his lifestyle. I was literally brought up into it. I was taught to fight. My uncle used to take me down alleyways and have people come up on me and beat me up in alleyways until I knew how to defend myself against multiple people at once. This kid didn't have to go through that. I was taught that when you hear certain things, when you're outside and you're walking around, that if you hear tires screeching, if you hear somebody saying a certain word, like I don't speak Spanish, but I know enough Spanish that if I'm on the block, I can hear certain words that they may say that's going to come back and I need to move or I need to get out of there. He didn't know that stuff. And so it's like I used to blame myself so much for the decisions. And the hard part was like I went to the young man's funeral that passed away from this, right? And I went to show my respects. And I went and told the parents, like, this is my fault. Like I'm the reason you will never get to see your child ever again. And I apologize. And there's nothing that I could do to take it back, but I am so sorry. And just know that if you need anything, just let me know and I will make it happen. And they looked me in the eyes and they told me, we will never forgive you because this is a decision that you made and we will never get to see our child again because of it. And that stuck with me for so long growing up that I didn't have emotions. I didn't have feelings after that point. I can really pinpoint that was like the day that I really was just like, the only emotion I knew was anger. Was just being angry all the time. And that was where, when I was on that dock in San Diego, they were able to pull that out of me and help me let that go and help understand that it wasn't my fault. It wasn't a decision just because I told him that he could be there. It wasn't my decision. His parents could have kept him inside. There was multiple things that could have happened. And now, mind you, that doesn't justify the action, but it also helped me understand that the decision that was made wasn't only my fault and I have to let it go. So that was where they walked me through the self-forgiveness process. And that was literally when I knew that I could trust these people, that I was able to find trust within everybody in the community now. And even, don't get me wrong, I trusted Jessica, but that was because I knew her from when I was around the area, but I didn't know who Mitch was. I was just, hey, hi Mitch, and this guy who went to, college and has this great mentality of understanding things and he just wants to help me. I was like, wild. I was like, I don't know about that, but literally ever since I became a part of the group, it has changed my life in multiple levels, from financial wise to relationship wise to even just bettering myself and helping support other people, because I used to really have a Tupac mentality is what I'd call it, a fuck the world thought process was like, really what was instilled in me. And now it's like, instead of having that thought, I'm like, okay, what can I do to help this person? How can I help them process this? How can I help them actually understand these things? And so that for me was more about trust and opening up at that moment compared to safety, because you can be in a house and feel safe, but that doesn't mean you're safe. Someone can still kick in the door. You can be in a car and feel safe driving, but yet if you hit black ice and you end up, hitting another vehicle, you're no longer safe. So that's kind of more of where, for me, it was a trust thing more than a safe thing.
Wow. I think that's that's something that a lot of people, I don't think, really understand. I think they put safety and trust together. And I appreciate that you split that apart and how it really affected you, because you're right. You can feel safe in a moment, but something can change and you're not safe anymore. But it's actually having that trust that something is going to change or something's going to work out. And even if it's not beautiful going through it and fun, right?
Yep.
Because it's certainly not a fun moment.
Oh, definitely not, and that was like, when I told my wife that I cried to these grown men, she was kind of like even shook. She was like, "What? You don't even cry to me. Like, what's up with that?" And it really is like I told her, I said, for me, it's like I trust, don't get me wrong, I trust my wife. But at the time there was, we were still getting into the group, and we didn't fully build our relation. When we first started dating, we didn't build our relationship off of agreements. So we had these different levels of communications. And I mean, there was nights before where we would literally argue for hours on end, literally till like 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, literally just arguing. And the whole time, the points that we were trying to get across were the same thing. But being that we had different understandings of our vocabulary and how we were like, what we define different words as, being that we both grew up completely different, that's what made it hard. So we'd spend these hours of arguing just to finally get to the point where we finally understood what we were saying. And then it all made sense. But it was like, all right, we just spent, what was the point of the last 3, 4 hours? If we would have just had a better understanding of the words we were using, it would have been way better. And so like now, that we've built our relationship through agreements better, and actually having these agreements as standards has actually helped us process a lot and understand a lot more. Hence why I was able to really split those two up from safe to trust. Because for me, the relationship agreements have really made those points, understanding that we had to be specific on what did these words mean to us and how do they define within our relationship. And so, we have trust in our relationship and we have a safety in our relationship, but there were also two different relationship agreements that we agreed upon being within those points.
So, wow. So 3 years later, right? Roughly 3 years later?
Yep.
What kind of difference has it made with your, you've talked a lot about the difference with you and your wife and your relationship, but what difference has that made with you and your son or your other family members even?
That's huge. So with my son, so I grew up in my household was, if you do not respect your elders, that is a problem. My dad or my mother would hit us. And I don't say that to and I just want to point this out. I don't say that in the sense of blame. I say that in the sense that for one, they didn't have the tools. 2, they didn't have a community to support them the way they did. And 3, they didn't know no better, because that's what they were taught. So like my mom and dad would, they were very abusive. My dad was an alcoholic. My family was known drug addicts, from meth and crack, stuff like that. I used to see, my mom's overdosed in front of me. My dad's, got drunk and used to beat us. There was multiple different things that really came in within that. So for me, being a father, the way that I grew up was abusive. For the first 4 years of Milo's life, I was not a good father. I wasn't a good husband to Kayla. There was nights that he'd be crying and she'd be trying to do everything she can to try to get him to stop. And I'd get mad because I had to go to work the next day, and I'd be like, can you just shut him up so I can go to sleep? I mentally and physically was not a good spouse or father. And so as he grew up older, I did the same things my dad did to me, to him. Once he came to that age where it was like, hey, don't do this, smack his hand. Oh, hey, don't touch that, smack his hand. Oh, you really want to mess with me? Spank his butt. That was very big. It got to the point where Milo would cower anytime I raised my voice. and I'm obviously not, I'm not saying this as if though I'm proud of it. I'm speaking so you have a context of like how critical it really was. So like anytime I'd raise my voice, even if it wasn't to him, even if it was just in general, he would like do this. And I started to see that point, and it was very it was sad. It was very sad for me because the number one thing I used to tell myself all the time was like I never wanted to be like my dad, right? And the number one thing I became was my dad. And that was, especially as a father, like that was hard because my dad really wasn't like, he was in the picture, but he wasn't around. Work was more important to him. The only time like I really actually like he cared was like when I was in sports. I used to play football, basketball. My parents always made us be in some sort of sport. And so he would show up at my games. He'd show up drunk, but he'd show up. But he wasn't like in the household to help me understand like how to become a man or anything like that. And it was cool because like, when I first went out to the TT ranch and I talked with Katie tells me, Joe, you're very feminine. And I said, what? No, I don't think, are you talking to the right person here? No. And she's like, it's not like you're like this girly girl. She's like, but you can tell you run off of your emotions. And that was because I was raised in a house with women. It was me, my two sisters, and my mother. My dad wasn't around in that point to help us, for me to understand that. And so my mom was always very big within, by the age of 10, I was paying bills in my mother's house. And my mom was still on drugs when I was younger, and my older sister pretty much raised me. And so my older sister, me and her have a very great connection, very great, relationship. And even me and my mom have had a great relationship. Now, mind you, there have been some boundaries that I've had to learn to set for myself, being a husband and being as the provider of my family compared to when I was a young man and my mother was my only priority. But as I grew, and once, 3 years later, I now can raise my voice around my son. Not saying that I need to, but I can raise my voice and him not feel as if though he has to cower. My son actually communicates with me like, okay, so last night there was a situation. Our kitchen isn't the biggest, but we were all three, me, Kayla, and Milo, were all in there, and then our dog too was in there too. And she's not like a big dog. She's a pit bull, blue nose, bully pit. She's about knee high, right? She was in there. Kayla was in there. I was in there. Milo was in there, and I'm trying to chop stuff. We were making soup. I'm trying to chop stuff up so that we could put in the soup. Kayla's trying to get the noodles, and Milo's trying to grab the noodles from like the strainer, trying to steal some. And Kayla explained to him like, "Hey, I already gave you some. You have to eat your other food, before you can have more because we're gonna put this in our soup." And so he kind of like stepped away, but then he tried like sneaking back in, and I had to be a little more sort of like, "Hey, Milo, Mom just told you can't have no more of them. So I need you to step out of the kitchen, okay? And let's step out. You need to go eat your food. That's it." And like I did it just like that in a stern voice, right? And so he stepped out, but then he came up to Kayla and he was like, "Hey, so I did not like how Dad talked to me there. Can you help me express that to him?" And she's like, "I can tell him, but you have to make sure you tell him too." So he's like, "Okay, hey Joe," and he calls me Joe, right? And we have this we have this respect thing where it's like he's just another individual. We've explained to him that my name is Joe. I am also your dad. You can either call me Dad or you can call me Joe. And Kayla the same way. He can either call her Mom or he can call her Kayla, or even my mother, his grandma. You can call her by her name or you can call her Grandma, right? But he calls me Joe. So he goes, "Joe, I did not like how you spoke to me in that situation." And I was like, "Okay." Mind you, I'm still walking process myself, and so it kind of, I had to take a step, take a moment, breathe, kind of understand where he was coming from, because the way, once again, I was programmed was I'm the authority figure, I'm the father, you're going to listen to me, this is how it is, because that's what my dad made me believe.
Right.
But we look at him as another, growing human being. And so I took a moment. I stopped what I was doing. I went and sat down with him and said, okay, listen, I understand that you didn't like what I said and how I said it. But I need you to also understand the reason I did it was because mom already told you once, and it's okay that you want more noodles. You can express that more to us and try to persuade us more to be like, hey, can I have some more noodles?
Mm.
But since I already told you once, dad had a reaction within himself to go straight into, hey, you need to listen to me. And that wasn't necessarily right, but I did it because you weren't listening either at that moment. So it's
Mm.
like the relationship now, and he was like, okay. He was like, I understand. Thank you for telling me that. I was like, perfect. I was like, is there anything else you want to say? And he's like, nope, that's good. That helped me out. Thanks, Dad. And so like the relationship now that I've had from my son to what it used to be is 10 times different. And it's created a lot more open communication, not just between me and him, but between me and my wife, because we have to talk too about, hey, how are we going to handle this situation with him? How are we going to handle this situation with him? Right. So it has changed completely, and it has opened up a lot more as a family dynamic to
Mm.
actually understand how we all communicate with each other, which then has also opened then my relationship with like my mom and my dad. My mom has a lot of reactions towards the
Mm.
group and towards us.
Mhm.
Because so like Thanksgiving, we didn't go to our family's Thanksgiving. We actually held a whole Thanksgiving up at Mitch and Jess's. So we stayed out there for like a week. And we did the whole Thanksgiving over Thanksgiving. We all had a fun time. It was great. It was building our community within us of what we're building besides our family, right? Now, mind you,
Mm.
we didn't go to my wife's families either. So it
Right.
wasn't like we just were like, oh, we're just gonna skip my family and go to this one, go to that one. No, it's just we were literally gone for it. And or like even now for Christmas, we have a whole thing we're doing for Christmas, and I'm not gonna be here for Christmas. And so my
Mm.
mom has had a reaction to that. She has been better in communicating that with me on like feeling like, oh, like I feel as if though you just care like about them and that's it. And like I've told my mom, I'm like, it's not that I just care about them. It's that the community that we are building is more important to me than anything right now.
Mm.
And I said, don't get me wrong. I asked my mom, I said, hey, is there another day that we can do Christmas that would work better for us to be there compared to not getting to come by at all?
Mhm.
And so like that's open me. Normally I wouldn't like do that with my mom. Normally I'd be like, Kayla, we have to go to my Christmas. Like, it's just like, it's affecting my mother and we have to do this. But what I have learned is that her emotions are not my responsibility.
Mm.
And that is something huge that I have to understand because being that her emotions are valid and
Mm.
she has the right to feel upset that, hey, I don't get to see my son or my grandson for Christmas, or I didn't get to see him Thanksgiving. Like, she has the right to feel that. But that does not it's not valid for me to feel guilty because of her feelings. Because if
Right.
I find it, yeah, because if I find it better that my son's going to get more, and my wife's going to get more support, and I'm going to get more support by being out by the local community that we're building
Mm.
than being with my family, I have to do what is best. And what
Mhm.
is best at that point is understanding that even though my mom may not like this decision I am making, it is a decision that is best for my family. It is the decision that's best for the community that we're building. But it still has opened that up for me to be able to communicate that to my mom. And I've done that. And she's understood my points. She says, I get it. She goes, that doesn't change her feeling about it, but she understands. And
Mm.
so for me, before I would have never, I was a mama's boy through and through. I was like 100% a mama's boy. And so that was hard even for my wife to really work through me. But I've now finally got to the point of understanding that like I had to tell my mom, like, Mom, I love you and I will always be your child. And I'm her youngest, so obviously there's that too. I
Mm.
was like, always be your child and I'll always be here for you. But I am now a young man. And don't get me wrong, I'm only 27 years old, but I am a young man, and I have my wife who's looking up to me, who she's a stay-at-home mom. I have my son who is homeschooled, and he looks up to me. I said, I'm no longer this young boy. I have responsibilities, and I have responsibilities that are no option. It's not like I could just be like, hey, I'm not going to be a dad today. I'm going to go back to being a mama's boy, and I'm just going to go home for like a week, like I can't do that. I have to take responsibility within these points that I've decided. I decided to be a husband. I decided to be a father. And I decided to be the leader of my household, and I will continue to do that. And if that affects my relationship outside of the family that I come from, unfortunately, I've had to look at that and be like, that's okay, and be okay with it, understanding that once again, what I'm building is what's best. And at some point in time, they will understand that the decisions that I made weren't out of emotion to them of trying to be spiteful or anything like that. It was simply decided through what was the best action, not just for me, but for my family.
That's pretty impressive that you can have those kinds of conversations with your mom like that, and even with Milo, like the fact that he now feels safe or has trust or has the vocabulary or all of it, that he can actually say, hey, this wasn't a good way to speak, and I don't like that. And I don't know many kids outside of our group who can actually do that. Like most kids I know just sort of have temper tantrums, or they blow up in some other way, or they get moody and silent or whatever it is. But I don't know many of them who can actually have that conversation and say, hey, wait a minute, like, didn't appreciate that.
Yeah, no, and honestly, it took me some time to get used to, and I'm still getting used to it. And honestly, I don't know any kid that really, other than like you said, in our community, that can actually effectively talk and describe what they're feeling and why they're feeling that way, which is really cool because, like, we've only had, Tech and Tutor for it's going on 3 years. And that has been like a huge, he's on level 3. He's halfway through level 3. And yeah, no, for real. And even for myself, I'm still on level 1. My wife's on level 2. But it's like he's effective within these words that he has learned, which is great. But it's like, I guided a gentleman that's part of our local community. I told him, I'm like, hey, he got TT, and he's like, what do you think is the best way for me to like support my son doing it? I said, you do the basics. And he's like, really? I'm like, listen, when I first got it, I focused on custom lists. I was like, I had so much traumatic things. I was like, I'm going to focus on customs lists. So I really, for the first 2 years, I really just focused on custom lists. And I'm now just really getting dedicated to doing my basics, because now I'm understanding. I went through all these things with customs, and they helped me out. I learned how to make more money. I learned how to lose weight within it myself. I learned how to let things go. It was a whole thing within me. But now I have to redefine all the original words that I know. And that is where, for me, it's like, I told him, I'm like, be ahead of him in the basics. I said, because my son right now is ahead of me in the basics, and he's out schooling me. And I have to figure out, half the time I'm like, dude, you're further along than me. I have to figure it out here. Give me some time. And he's like, oh, okay. But it's like, yeah, it's super cool that, be able to see these developments, especially after like, just 3 years of being a part of it. I'm excited to see, when 7 more years from now, when it's 10 years we've had it, and the difference that we've made, not just within us, but, even when he's in 3 years, when he's 10 years old, I'm excited to see where he's at from there. I'm excited to see how he's going to grow from there. And even within myself and my relationship with both my parents and, my wife and her parents too, I'm excited to see what's to come, as long as we keep pushing ourselves to understand for what is best, which that was part of our relationship agreement, was that we will always push for what is best.
I love that you're on this journey with the whole family. Like, I love that you and your wife and your child or your son are all doing this together, and that you're actually able to use this outside, even if your rest of the family is not on board. I love the fact that you're able to have these different conversations that you've been able to have before, and actually being able to articulate, like, hey, this is what's also important to me, and you know, this is where I'm taking responsibility, right? So because I know so many smart people, educated people, and our communication is not like that.
Well, and it's huge because it's like, you know, when someone thinks that they're properly educated and they don't have the tools, it I have a lot of friends that are, you know, have degrees, stuff like that. They look down on you. But
Mhm.
when you're able to actually communicate with them properly, they almost go in a wow moment. Like, wow, I didn't like a lot of people for me, like they see, you know, I have tattoos on my hands, arms, you know, I've had them for years. When people see me, that's a huge thing because they automatically like people see these on my fingers and they think, oh, he was incarcerated. I've never been to jail in my life. Never. The
Mm.
way I was taught was that if you get caught, you're stupid. And that was literally what I was
I
always
mean,
taught. Yeah,
well, not really wrong either, right?
yeah, exactly.
Like
So
bad context, but not really wrong.
yeah, you know. And so like that's what for me it's like, but people are quick to judge right away and they see this and they
Mm.
think, oh, you know, especially I got LA, I got the P for Pittsburgh, you know, I got the numbers on my fingers, and everybody thinks like, oh, he was probably incarcerated from that year to that year. In reality, it's my birth year, and then 2009 was the year that I attempted to commit suicide. And so
Mm.
that was where like everything, like I've told people, everything on my body has a meaning. There's a reason why I put a tattoo on there. But yet, like, okay, so like I work in the automotive industry. I'll say that's my 9 to 5 that I do besides building with my business. And I work with a lot of older people. And when I say
Mm.
old, I'm talking like 70s, like 80s, you know, a
Mm.
lot of older people. And I get a lot of people, and now I dress in a tie, a button up tie, nice shoes, clean pants,
Mm.
the whole works of it, right? And I had a lady one time. I'm typing up her ticket and I'm closing it out, and she goes, "Why do you have all that disgusting stuff on your body?" And I paused. I was like, "All right, hang on." Now, I had the tools this time, so I stopped.
Mhm.
I breathed, and I was like, "Are you talking about my tattoos?" And she's like, "Yeah, like why would you decide to put them on?" And I was like, "Well, everything on my body actually has a meaning. And if you have a question about anything that's on here, I'll gladly tell you the story of how it became a part of me and what it is."
Mm.
And so she's like, "Why do you have those numbers on your fingers?" And I was like, "Well, it's actually funny that you say that." So from 1998 to 2009, the years of my life that the responsibilities that I had were not effective to my growth of like actually having to pay bills and things like that. By the time I hit 2009, I was so built up with all this traumatic stuff in my life that I wanted to take my life. And so as I was sitting in my mom's house with a gun in my mouth, about to pull the trigger, this guy, which I have this guy, Mac Miller, tattooed on me. I don't know if you know who he is. He's a famous musician,
Mm.
a rapper, and one of his songs came on, and on here I have tattooed up on top. His song came on, and the lyrics that spoke were, "Your life's precious, ain't no need to go and kill yourself." And
Wow.
that spoke right at the moment as I was about to pull the trigger in my mother's house. And as those words came on, I realized what I was doing, and I was like, I'm literally gonna blow my brains out in my mom's house for her to find me, and then to always have that memory in this house. And that's what I'm accepting for myself.
Mm.
I was like, no, I was like, that's not gonna happen. I was like, I'm not doing it. So I put the gun down and I went upon my life. So I explained this to her, and her face just dropped. And I told her, I was like, as you can see, it all has relation back to something that has happened within my life. I said, I was
Mm.
always taught never to put something on your body, just to put something on your body. I said, everything that I have on here has a meaning, and I'm more than open to explain it to anybody who wants to ask me about what that meaning is and what it stands for. And so
Mm.
she just was kind of like, you could tell like straight befuddled and like had to take a step back in the sense of like, oh, well, I'm sorry to hear that. And I was like, yeah. But like in that moment, like, you know, it also taught me that no matter what persona you put on, people will judge you. And even before this talk, like me, I was talking to Kayla, I was like, should I wear my sweatshirt? Should I put on something else? Should I put something on? And she's like, why? And I was like, well, just the way people perceive you is one thing. And she's like, well, but it's about the words you speak too. She goes, and what you say. She goes, if someone can't just see that, you know, you're at home and you're comfortable, why do you feel as though you have to dress up and put on this persona for somebody when in reality you can speak your words? And I was like, yeah, you're right. I was like, you're correct on that. I was like, you know, but it's also like that was something that was programmed into me, was that people like even when I got these tattoos on my hands, before I got them, my tattoo artist stops and he's like, I want to make sure you are 100% okay with doing this. And I'm like, yeah, that's why I'm like, do it. Yeah, that's what I'm here for. And the guy's like, I want you to understand, because he had tattoos on his hand. When you put them on your hands, it is completely different than just putting a regular tattoo on your body. He goes, it changes job interviews. He goes, it changes every perspective that people have upon you. He goes, it changes, literally, people will just look at you different. He goes, and I want you to understand this before you do this. And, you know, I kind of took his heating with a grain of salt. I was like, yeah, whatever. Okay. Just do it, you know? But it's like, as I've lived with these tattoos now on my hands, yeah, he was 100% correct. Just the way people perceive you, the way people talk to you, the way people step up to you. But it's like, then when you're able to actually have a proper vocabulary and articulate the words that you actually want to say, the whole dynamic changes. And people who have known me my whole life and who've talked to me before I was with the group to now after I'm with the group literally tell me, Joe, just even the clarity and the certainty you speak when you talk is completely different than when I first knew you. And they're like, that's super cool to see that change happen, because, you know, I was told I was going to die by 20. I was told that I was never going to amount to nothing. And these things were engraved in my head by not just teachers, they were by friends, they were by, you know, acquaintances, just people who just seen the life that I was living. It was just like, you're not going to amount to nothing. But now, you know, I'm doing bigger things than most people around me have done, and I see a bigger vision, and it just doesn't stop here. It's continuing to grow.
Yeah, it's such a crazy world that we live in, that you are judged in the first 30 seconds of somebody looking at you. And what's really great about this, and I'm hoping that people are like stay more than 30 seconds in, right? But when they get into the chat with Cats, they get to know somebody on the other side. They get to know some of their life story and where they got to, you know, where they are now and what their life was like before. And hopefully that actually changes people's perspectives when they're looking at people in public now, and not just going, oh, that person's not dressed this way, so obviously they're this, that, and the other thing, right? Or they have this, you know, like even if you had like neck tattoos or face tattoos, they all have different meanings. Obviously, you know, a lot of people know that there are different meanings to that, but because you have that there doesn't mean that's who you are now.
Yes, that is so critical. And I hope that if people could take anything from this conversation or any of your chats with Cats, they can literally see that point, and that's why I've been very open throughout this whole conversation, because for me, being open, I hope that someday, I'm sorry. I hate.
I know, I said the word too, and I was like, that's not the right word, but I'm
yeah. Well, and I know people in my community, when they watch this, and they know how I feel about lone wolf and the word hope. Hope is a poor man's game. I've always said that. You can hope for anything you want, but there's a difference between hope and actually doing it, and you can actually do that. And so the reason that I actually speak from the heart and speak just openness within who I am and the things that I've been is because I know that this will reach somebody. And whether it's one person, 12 people, 50 people, it don't matter. At the end of the day, I know it'll reach somebody. and they will either feel comfortable enough to find me, reach out to me and talk with me, or two, they'll feel comfortable enough in what I spoke about that they feel as if they can make a change and they can make the decision to make the change. And now, mind you, like I always tell people, you can try to change as much as you want. I used to try to do it all the time, but until I found these tools is what really reprogrammed how I thought and the way that I went about things. And so that's why I always tell people, like, you can start by, doing the little things, but in reality, you need the right tools to help change you and to help reprogram who you are so that you can be a genuine version of yourself, a living being that can make decisions, not based off emotions, but based off logic and understanding on things that make sense, and not just this, oh, I want to do this because it feels good, and I want to do this because it feels great. Like, there's a lot of things that feel great that aren't good for you. And coming from someone who's 10 years sober off heroin, I tell you, heroin felt great when I did it, but I wouldn't go back to it ever again, because the feeling I have now of the things that I do now exceeds that feeling tenfold. And that's such a huge thing for people to understand.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I know there's a lot of impactful things that you've said today, and I really hope people, gosh, there I go again. That's the wrong word. I know people are going to get something from this, Joe.
You have to redefine that word hope in your TT. That's what you have to do.
Yeah, I do. And it's one of those things, I don't even use that word that often. So it's very strange that it's coming up now. But I know there's people who are going to watch this and they're going to get something from this. And maybe they're going to help somebody else in their life, or it's going to help them. Because I know that your story it's raw, it's real, and it's the truth. And people are really wanting truth now. They're sick and tired of all this, make-believe stuff and the TikTok videos that everyone looks perfect and has this perfect life. People really are getting tired of it because they know their life isn't like that. So I know people are going to get something from this, and I appreciate you for just sharing, like just being so open today, because I do know there's a lot of people who are still holding back and who don't want to share. So
no, I appreciate that. And for anybody who, does listen to this and for what you get out of it, if you ever want to talk about anything or anything at all, please, I hope in you too, Kat, don't ever be afraid to reach out. Don't ever be afraid to talk. I know sometimes I don't always respond right away, but it's because I try, social media is not my strong suit, but I'm getting better with it. But please, don't be afraid to reach out on any platform, any situation, even asking just for my phone number, just to have a conversation. And I'd be more than willing to. And especially if it's any discussion about anything that I've already spoken about today, or even anything further. Because I do believe that one thing we lack in this world isn't just that being truthful or being that genuine self, but I do believe that we lack a form of intimacy within each other as relationships, and that's something that I myself have been learning more and more just recently, even. And it's cool because if you break down the word intimacy and you redefine it, it literally goes into me, I see. And that's something huge that I really do feel as if though people forget that the number one thing when it comes to intimacy is starting with yourself and looking within yourself about how you can be intimate with other people. And sometimes it is just opening up and being truthful and honest and just genuine. And you're right. Life, we're getting so caught up in these animatronics and these AI tools, and I mean everything with it, and we forget about being real human beings and genuine within each other and being able to move those points and being intimate with the conversations we have. So
yeah, and the intimacy is really what's building the community, what's really building relationships and empowering others to move on in points with their life and not hold on to those things anymore. So I know you may have already mentioned something, but I want to just specifically ask you, if you were to go back to your 10-year-old self, what advice do you want to give him?
You know, I think Mitch asked me this one time. And I think when he asked me, what I remember I told him was the advice that I'd give to him was to not be so angry. I was so built up with anger. Emotions weren't real to me. It was only anger, 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 anger. Um, and the more I've thought when I hear this question, right, I look back, and the young man that I see did not have a thought in the world of who I am today. This version of me was never something that I would have ever thought was real. From just even the way that I talk to growing out my mustache the way that I have, that was never something I thought I could do. To even just having a family and having a son. So when I really think about that question, to me, I agree with not being so angry at the world, but learn to forgive. Because it's one thing to be angry, but it's another thing to forgive.
Mm.
And even to the point of not just, and I'm not necessarily talking about like forgiving others. I mean, obviously you should forgive others, but I would tell myself to forgive myself. Because for me, just the decisions I made at a very young age weren't good. And I held those with me for a long, long time, even before being the age of 10. And that was very critical for me. So it's like now, like I remember when Mitch asked me, yeah, it was to let go of anger. But now when I have been further along in my process and more thought about this would be to forgive and to forgive myself, because the decisions I made were due to my environment. And I can sit here and I was angry at my environment all the time, but I never forgave my environment because it wasn't my environment's fault either. The decisions I made were mine, and the decisions that happened were, don't get me wrong, if I were to live somewhere else and live a different life and everything like that, yeah, things could have been different. Or like I have an older brother that me and him don't talk at all. I have grown to, I grew to hate him on multiple levels. I resented him is a better word, because when we moved to California, I mean, when we moved from California to here, my mom left him there with my grandma because he was like 16 at the time and he had a life that he was already living in. And I used to always say, if I had an older brother, maybe I would have never got my ass kicked. If I had an older brother, maybe I would have never got into drugs. If I had an older brother, maybe I would have never did this. Maybe I would have never did that. And I blamed him. And I had so much hate and anger for him for years. And I'll be honest, I still am working through this. It is not something that I've let go. I still haven't talked to him in years. He's deleted off all my Facebook accounts, all my Instagram accounts, any sort of way. He has no contact with me, and he, even if he wanted to, he couldn't get in contact with me. And that started at a very young age. And honestly, I would tell myself to forgive that, because it wasn't his fault. It wasn't, the environment's fault. In reality, I can say it wasn't my mom's fault either, but it was something that has still stuck with me. On always, because it forced me to be an older brother in my sibling relationship. Yeah, I had an older sister, but as I grew, I had to protect my older sister and my two older sisters. I always felt that I had to be the man of the house because my dad wasn't around and I had to defend for my mom. I always felt like it grew me a lot quicker than what I should have. I never got to be a kid, and I used to blame that on him horribly, and that sat with me. So to be real about it, I would tell myself to forgive myself for a lot of these points that I carried with me from that age on until I started with the group. And even now, I still carry some with him, but I'm actively working through them.
Mhm.
Obviously, you have to, you got to keep, if you're not moving, if you're not growing, you're dying.
Mhm.
So that's been a huge point, but I would tell myself to forgive myself for everything that has happened and anything that will to come, to not hang on to them the way that I did.
Oh. Yeah, a lot deeper than you thought that answer was going to be, huh?
Yeah, 100%.
That's gonna lay with some people and hit home. I know it, because I know even for myself, I'm still walking through process with some family, and yeah, just because we're doing the work doesn't mean we are, in the quotes, perfect, right? We're working on being a better version of ourselves every single
Exactly.
day, but we are not the epitome of no problems, nothing goes wrong in our life, and we have perfect communication with everybody. So
Exactly.
and yeah, important for us to remember those things too. So thank you for sharing that. I know we're on a Sunday with your family time, and I really want to respect that you have time with your family too before getting back to work in the week. Any last thoughts or advice that you want to share before you go?
Yeah, first off, I want to say thank you for having me. Thank you for wanting to explore a little more about the life of Joe Jackman. I think that's always really cool. I did an interview with Owen too, and it's just been really cool to see these different points come through with different people, and the different questions that can come up. I think it's very fun, and once again, just I appreciate your time, and I'm sure, yourself are a busy person. And I know sometimes finding time for something to be able to sit down and do this can be more critical than anything. So thank you for that. I do want to shout out to anybody that, who listens to this and thinks that, there's not a way. Always understand that there is a way, and that having open conversations with people can lead sometimes to these ways. And just like you said, we're not perfect, but we're leading to being as the best possible version of ourselves every single day. And I think if you can resonate with any of that, or anything that I said, please just reach out, and let's have a conversation and just see where it goes. So but thank you again, Kat. I really do appreciate you having me.
Oh, my pleasure, honestly. I'm just so grateful that you were so willing to share about your life and your story, and just so open and honest about it. So thank you so much for your time, and I'll see you in another Self Perfected, and probably at the event next year.
Yeah, I'll be there. So we already got our tickets ready. So I've never been on a cruise before, but I'm kind of afraid of boats. So we're gonna see how this goes. Cause yeah, I'm not afraid of boats. I'm afraid of whales, and not even just whales. I'm afraid of killer whales, because they are smart individual creatures. I understand this boat is gonna be huge, and I get that. That does not make a difference. And so it's gonna be a learning process for me. Me and my wife have already talked about this. So. But I'm super excited.
Yeah, you're going to be trapped on a boat with all of us for a few days, so you're in good hands.
Definitely, definitely.
And if not, we're gonna come up with some things anyways, and be like, oh, gotta go through that thing. All right.
Even like when we meet up on, say, for clubhouses here locally, I swear it's always something comes up, and I gotta walk to that point. Oh, I gotta walk to that point. So, but it's awesome. It's cool that we can be in a community like this, to where we can actually open these up. So.
Well, I'm looking forward to actually meeting you in person and speaking with you this time, instead of just like in passing. And I'm sure we're going to have one of those late night conversations with a bunch of us on the deck. And, if there's a fire pit or something, we'll be there, and we'll have those late night conversations. And
Definitely. You would definitely catch me there.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Joe. I'll talk to you later.
Have a good one, Kat.